day. This is ENG 303, study session 7. Context-sensitive phrase structure rules. Introduction. In the last chapter, we discussed phrase structure rules. It was a general analysis of structures which do not consider the context in which each of the words in the sentence occur. Hence, context-free phrase structure rules allow grammatical but anomalous sentences to occur in the grammar. In this chapter, we are going to situate each word in its context and constrain it from occurring in wrong context. This makes it easier for us to be specific in our analysis and avoid generating anomalous sentences. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Interpret context-sensitive phrase structure rules. 2. Generate context-sensitive phrase structure rules. And 3. Generate acceptable sentences from context-sensitive phrase structure rules. Pre-test. 1. What is the difference between context-sensitive and context-free phrase structure rules? 2. What is the role of the context in context-sensitive phrase structure rule? Content. Context is the environment in which words derive their actual meanings. Syntactically, certain words co-occur with certain other words while they reject other words. In other words, when a word occurs in a slot of a particular sentence, it may be meaningful, whereas when it is taken to another slot, the meaning is at variance with word view. This is our focus in this chapter. In the last chapter, we generated different sets of context-sensitive rules to account for sets of sentences. However, we realized that such rules generate both acceptable and unacceptable sentences. In this chapter, we shall invoke some rules which will guide the occurrence of words in specific contexts and stop us from producing anomalous sentences or expressions. Context-sensitive phrase structure rule. The context-sensitive phrase structure rule is an extension of the context-free phrase structure rule. This means that we first analyze sentences using the format of the context-free rules before we proceed to the context-sensitive rule. Let us start our discussion with this pair of sentences. A. Opia loves the man. B. Lami hates rice. The procedure is to first analyze the sentences using the context-free phrase structure rule format. The rules will be as follows. Sentence 1. Sentence 2. The next step is to generate a set of context-free phrase structure rules. This is presented below. Now that we have a set of rules, we shall identify each category and the words that are attached to it. N. Opia, Lami, man, rice. V. Like, eat, death, the. It means that 3 categories of words are represented in the sentences. These are noun, verb, and determiner. The next step is to consider the context in which these words can occur and generate a set of context-sensitive rules for them. We start with the nouns. The procedure is to move the words around, put them in different positions where an NP can occur, and if they make sense. Here is a sample. A. Lami loves the man. Opia ate rice. Since Opia and Lami can be swapped without making the meaning of the sentences anomalous, then we can say that the two nouns belong to the same class. Let's call this N1. We look for other nouns and swap them as follows. C. Rice loves the man. Man ate rice. When we look at these sentences, we will realize that sentence C is anomalous because rice is not known to love people, except perhaps in fiction and folk tales in which the impossible is made possible by the imaginative ability of the author. But syntax deals with the ordinary meaning of expressions. Therefore, the noun rice does not belong to the class of nouns in N1. So we create another class of nouns as N2. In sentence D, man occurs in the subject position where Opia and Lami occur. But the sentence is unacceptable because it does not have an article. Thus, man belongs to another class of nouns, say N3. So for nouns, we have the following classification. N1, Opia, Lami. N2, rice. N3, man. The next class is the verb. There are two verbs in the sentences. Again, we try to swap the verbs in the two sentences to see whether they belong to the same class or not. A. Opia ate the man. B. Lami loves rice. In these sentences, the verb in A is moved into sentence B, and the verb in B is moved into sentence A. The result is that sentence A becomes anomalous, since it is anomalous for a person to eat another person. Except Opia is a cannibal, but we don't have that information in the sentence. However, the second sentence is acceptable if the person likes eating rice, but unacceptable if the erotic sense of love is meant. Given the problems associated with the swapping of these verbs, we realize that the verbs are not interchangeable. They therefore belong to different classes as follows. V1, eat. V2, love. Note that it does not matter whether a verb is V1 or V2. Our interest is in showing that they are not in the same class. Thus, hit can be V2 while loves is V1. The last category is the determiner. However, there is no need to reclassify it. Having identified different categories of the items in the sentences, we shall now generate a set of context-sensitive rules for the two sentences above. We shall use the categories we identified as a basis for these rules. The last category is the determiner. However, since there is only one, there is no need to reclassify it. Having identified the different categories of the items in the sentences, we shall now generate a set of context-sensitive rules for the two sentences above. We shall use the categories we identified as a basis for these rules. Let's start with the class of nouns. Nouns classified as N1 occur before both verbs in the sentences above. Hence, we generate a rule that states this as follows. This rule means that in the sentences under analysis, the nouns Opia and Lami can occur before the verbs eat and love. The noun rice can occur after eat, V1, and the noun man can occur after the determiner. For verbs, we have the following rule. As the rule says, V1 eats occurs before the noun rice, which is N2, and after N1, which contains Opia and Lami. For V2, love occurs before a determiner and after Opia and Lami. Finally, we generate a rule for determiner. The rule is as follows. This rule says that the determiner occurs before N3, man. Generally, then, these are the rules that guide the formation of grammatical and acceptable sentences from the existing sentences that be analyzed. It makes it possible to generate anomalous sentences. You should use the rules to generate many sentences using only the words that have been labeled as N123, V12, and det. You are expected to arrive at acceptable sentences. Post-test. Analyze the following structures following the procedure above for context-sensitive phrase structure rules. 1A. Untu kicked the ball. B. Ade climbed the tree. 2. A. She bought oranges. B. He wrote a book. Summary. In this chapter, we have discussed how to generate context-free phrase structure rules. Note that we do this by taking a step at a time, and we cannot afford to skip a level. Otherwise, we may not arrive at the expected answer. In addition, if after generating your rules, you still arrive at anomalous sentences, this means that your rule as a whole or in part is wrong. Perhaps you made a mistake somewhere along the line. We have come to the end of study session 7. Thanks for listening.